Let's go out, we'll take no prisoners.
Welcome to Unleashed, a producer's guide to indie filmmaking. My name's Avi Fettergreen. I'm a producer based in Toronto and have been producing films for 30 plus years now, and have produced over 70 feature films. I also own a distribution company called Indie Canada Entertainment, which also has two sub-labels, which is Redwater Entertainment and Pride Pictures. The purpose of this podcast is to tell it like it is in our television and film industry here in Canada and probably applicable around the world. I welcome you and thank you for joining us. Today, our first guest on our first podcast is my friend and collaborator, Jeremy LaLonde. Jeremy, welcome.
Hi.
Jeremy, why don't you give us a little bit of background about you and your, I guess, history in the industry?
Oh God, we only have 3 hours, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So I'm a bit of I'm a hybrid. So I've done a little bit of everything. I'm an indie filmmaker. I've produced out of necessity, not choice, which I think is a lot of producers in Canada. And I've also, primarily focused on, directing and writing my own films, but as a way to make money to be able to afford to do so. I've worked in the television industry and the film industry as well, as an editor. And, on my way up, I edited everything. I've edited everything from, craft cooking videos, to Pilates videos, to game shows, scripted content, reality TV shows, you name it, I've cut it. And so on the way, but because of the nature of the, film landscape in Canada, which I'm sure we'll get into on this, uh, you know, it took a long time before I could actually stop editing full time in between making my films. So I'd edit a TV series or two, and then I'd make a film. And then I'd have to go back to editing to be able to, support my family because indie film doesn't do it. Uh, and it wasn't until I'd made probably my fifth or sixth film that I was actually making enough as a director, but that's because I was also starting to direct television that I was able to kind of start turning down editing jobs and just focus on that. And of course, that shifted back around. And then now, currently, I'm actually more focused on YouTube than I am on traditional film and television.
Right. And, I know you went to film school, right? And
Yep.
what was like, at what point in your life did you feel like you wanted to make films and other content and things like that? Like where did it all germinate from?
I came from a very small town called Cayuga, Ontario. Shout out to Southwestern Ontario. And even in high school, I was always writing stories. Even like my parents would say, and my teachers would say, as early as I could pick up a pencil, I was writing my own stories. Because that was just fun for me. I'd draw a little. I mean, I can't draw. I draw on pieces of paper people, and I cut them out, and those would be my toys. And it's not like we were poor; like we could afford regular toys, but I wanted to create my own, and I'd make up little stories with them, right? And I had this awesome teacher who would laminate my stories and just was very, very sweet. And then when I got into high school, I kind of convinced my high school drama teacher to let me write the school play and the 1 year, and then we started doing that. Back then there was a thing called the Sears Drama Festival, and so I would I had the opportunity to write a couple of those plays and direct some. And so I always had that bug, and there was a period, and I was always a film nerd too, though, right? And I did have a short period where I considered going through with theater,
Mhm.
which, if you want to make even less money than indie film, go into indie theater.
True enough.
Uh, And so, but I think, I was a big film nerd as well. And so I think that, I did take a year off between high school and college to really make a decision on which path I wanted to take. And I ended up leaning more into indie film because in high school, every summer I kind of started up my own like indie theater group amongst just my friends in high school, and I would write plays and produce a play every single summer, and would write parts for them,
Right.
which has led into a lot of my own indie films. Like you'll notice a lot of my films have, reoccurring actors showing up in them. And I think that's because of like my own training I gave myself in writing for specific people and
Right.
writing for specific actors.
Right.
And even that, but now I'm lucky. I'm work with great actors. Then I was working with high school kids who couldn't act their way out of a wet paper bag.
Right.
So it's a different kind of thing, but it's interesting how that kind of carried over into, my filmmaking.
Right. So you graduate post-secondary school, and so where did you go from there? Like did you start editing right away? Did you work as a PA? Like where did your career start in the industry?
I got really lucky in that as soon as I moved to Toronto, I had a friend who got a job as a PA on an indie feature, like a $1.2 million feature.
Right.
And he said, "Hey, they need like a daily driver for a day.
Right.
Can you come out and just drive around?" And so
Right.
I showed up at the production office. And at that point, what I had done during college
Mhm.
was a buddy of mine and I, Zach Melnick, we got some grants from the Trillium Foundation to make local heritage videos.
Right.
So while I was putting myself through college, we were making in the summer, and so instead of doing, actually, I was still doing plays too. It's insane. Uh, we produced like 5 feature-length documentaries on local history in the area that we grew up in. And
Right.
so when I came out of college, I actually had a decent resume already of
Right.
like of work.
Right.
And so I get on this show
Mhm.
and they ask for my resume, which
Right.
was great because of what it led to. And so literally at noon on my first day, I come back from like whatever driving I had done, and they said, "Hey, we noticed you have editing experience on your resume. We're looking for an assistant editor for the feature."
Right.
He said, "Great." I said, "I'd love to do that. Uh, do you, who's the editor? Who am I? I'd love to talk with them so I know how to prep it." I had never been an assistant
Right.
at all. I had no idea what an assistant did, but
Right.
I believe in fake it till you make it.
Right.
So they said, "Well, we haven't hired the editor yet, but we're going to do that after we finish shooting because we're just swamped, but we need someone to organize it all and whatnot." So I took that as an opportunity. I was like, okay. So what I ended up doing was I did all the assistant duties I needed to do.
Right.
I made dailies, did all that kind of stuff. But what I did, because I was young and hungry,
Mhm.
I edited the feature at night after I finished all those things.
Right.
And so at the wrap party for the film, I got a chance to talk to the producers and the director, and I asked them, I was like, "Hey, have you hired an editor yet?" And they said, "No, we're going to do that next week." I said, "Great. Do me a favor. If you guys got time, like in the next couple of days, can you just swing by my place just for a couple hours? I want to show you something." Didn't tell them anything, right? So they come by, and I'm like, "I'm going to show you the movie."
Right.
After watching it, they asked me to leave the room for like 5 minutes, and I came back and they offered me the job.
Nice.
And that just led to getting, and then one of the producers on that worked in television as their regular gig.
Mhm.
And so I ended up, she hired me to work on a bunch of like Pilates videos or something
Right.
else. But
Right.
all of that led to like then that production. Then she went to like another company and worked on a
Right.
game show.
Right.
And I kind of followed her for a little bit
Right.
as I started to carve out kind of my own path. And leading up to making my first film, which we did through back in the day. There was a thing called Bravo Fact, which I'm sure
Right.
Avi remembers,
Yeah.
but doesn't exist anymore. It was like one of the only places that, an up and coming filmmaker could get like actual money to make a short,
Right.
because it was a TV program on Bravo that would air every Friday night. I think they'd air like a half an hour, an hour worth of shorts.
Right.
And so you could submit and you can get the financing. And so I made one short through that. And then I kind of just thought shorts were stupid. I
Mhm.
was like, I don't understand the point of shorts. They take a lot of effort.
Yeah.
You get to put them in festivals, and that's fun and cool.
Yeah.
But then what?
But then you
they
don't make
just
a frickin' dollar off them.
make dollar off
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
and they're and so I was like, the only purpose of a short is a calling card. And for me, I was already writing features at that
Right.
point, and I was trained, like I wrote a one or two two-act plays every year,
Right.
um that I would then put on in the summer.
Right.
So I was already kind of trained in long form. I'm like, I just want to make a feature.
Right.
So I decided, after I got one Bravo fact, I decided I'd make a second one, but only as a calling card to the first feature I wanted to make, which
Right.
was the untitled work of Paul Shepard, which maybe five people have seen.
I'm
Um,
one of them.
Obviously one of them. And so that's what we did. We made that film,
Yeah.
a Bravo fact that was kind of in the same tone, in the
Yep.
same vibe of that film,
Yep.
to use to kind of get investors on board my first feature.
Right. And so, flash forward, you've done the untitled work of Paul Shepard. You've done Sex After Kids, which is how I met you, and
Yeah.
Andy Can distributed it. Then we made together How to Plan an Orgy in a Small Town. And then you went off and did a couple of other amazing films, including Ash Grove, which I think is, in my opinion, arguably your best work as a feature filmmaker. And then the light bulb came on, and we were looking for something new to do, and I sort of started talking to you about maybe doing a web series about you being a vegan and all that stuff. And alas, PB with J has been very successful, 2 seasons with Bell 5, and now you are on YouTube, right?
Yeah, and that was all an accident. My career trajectory was not to go towards YouTube, although
Mm.
now that I have, it feels like such an organic path, and it's the kind of thing that I look at, and we'll get into all of this.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like it feels like the future for what we wanted indie filmmaking to be back in the day. It
right,
feels like the promise, it still exists there,
right,
but the problem is that a lot of people don't take it seriously or respect it in the way they should. Even though, like YouTube, if you put all the streaming platforms together
yeah,
and times them by 10,
yeah,
that's how many active daily users YouTube has.
right,
But everyone still thinks that, well, they want to get their Netflix deal or their Prime deal or
right,
whatever bullshit. Where YouTube is thought of like a second class citizen amongst people in the traditional media
right,
industry. Anyway,
yeah,
but yeah, that all happened really organically because I went through like a whole life change myself. I used to be, twice the weight I am now. And, my way of losing weight was going plant-based. And I ended up losing half my body weight. And it just happened organically, where just I had a lot of people reaching out to me asking, "What did you do? How did you do it?" And I just got sick of having the same conversation over and over again. So I decided I'd make a website. I'd start making some videos so I could just share those with people, and I didn't have to repeat myself over and over
right,
again.
right,
And at that point, my initial push into that was called Former Fat Forker, and it was a bit edgier and not quite the right tone for what the audience really is.
right,
But like people like you and Jonas Chernick and other people just kept on saying you should do more with this,
yeah,
because I have such a passion for it.
yeah,
So it's kind of grown organically from there.
yeah. And I mean, basically, you've moved full time, or pretty much full time, making content for YouTube under your PB&J label, and because trying to get films financed today in this country is almost damn near impossible. And trying to make television. I mean, I know you've had some projects in front of broadcasters before, and they went deep into development and then ended up going nowhere. And features trying to get financing from our funders didn't go anywhere. And the landscape changed drastically for people like you and me, right?
Yeah, and it's funny. I was just at York University yesterday talking to a group of film students and kind of telling them, it's like, I don't know if I'm the right person to talk to you, because I'm not necessarily going to encourage you the way that some other people might encourage you for
Right.
this industry. I'll encourage you to create stories and tell your stories, but I'm just going to tell you to do it in a different way than I think anyone else would. Because, my career shifted, as a lot of people's did, around, 2018, 2019, I was kind of at the top of my game. I was, getting great jobs. I was working in television as a director. And then, and I'm not saying this to complain about it, but, diversity measures came in and shifted the entire landscape. And it was a good thing. It's still a good thing. It's long overdue in our industry, but it was just a matter of fact that guys like me, the phone stopped ringing. And
Right.
I've always been very proactive in my own career,
Right.
So I stopped getting job offers for television, which is really what I was replacing my old editing money with,
Right.
because indie film still wasn't making a ton of money. I got lucky. I made one film, James versus Future Self, that we had a decent budget for. But
Mhm.
even on that film, to make the budget work, I had to defer my entire writing fee,
Mhm.
till we could close the budget.
Right.
I thought, the whole time leading up to it, I was like, wow, we're finally making a movie with a decent budget. I'll actually get paid properly. And I still didn't get all of my fees. I still had
Yeah.
to defer them,
Yeah.
and they took advantage of the fact that because I was also going to edit it, it's like, well, there's this clause in the DGC thing that if you're the director is the editor, you can actually pay yourself less.
Right.
Isn't that great? And I'm like, why
Yeah.
is that great?
Yeah.
Shouldn't I finally be making some fucking money?
Yeah.
But no, it's just like the producers, and it's not against the producers.
Yeah.
You can only raise so much money, so it
Yeah.
wasn't anyone's fault, but it's just the nature of it was like going, it's like, when the fuck does it change?
Yeah.
That I finally get paid for doing the jobs I'm doing. I'm doing
Right.
3 jobs in this movie. I'm getting
Right.
paid for one and a
Yeah.
half of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is just the nature of it, unfortunately. So, and it's just a pain. I've always been a firm believer of just not getting upset about things that I can't control. And
Right.
the film and industry in Canada is something that nobody can control.
Right.
Even the people who are technically in charge can't control it, because they don't know what the hell they're doing half the time.
Right.
You're right, but it's just,
Yeah.
and it's not, but it's also, and I don't begrudge anyone for that. It's a tough job,
Right.
but it's fascinating. Like you mentioned, I've been close, and I still have one TV project that's in development that,
Right.
knock on wood,
Yeah.
goes forward at some point.
Right.
But I'm like, I can't sit around waiting for,
The
my
phone to
lottery,
ring. Yeah.
the phone ring or a lottery ticket to
Yeah.
cash in. It's just not the kind of person I am.
Right.
And so for me, the YouTube stuff, and the other thing that's frustrating, I'll get back to the YouTube stuff. The other thing that's frustrating about, you know, the industry is just full of gatekeepers.
Yeah.
It's full of people who have jobs that decide how much money gets doled out through telefilm,
Right.
through tax credits,
Right.
through, Ontario, you name it, that.
Yeah.
But then there's also the gatekeepers at film festivals, the programmers.
Right.
And it's not their fault. They only have so many slots for so many films and they have
Right.
so many submissions.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to television, there's only so many shows that they can air based on whether it's, traditional television, it's time slots, or it's a streamer and it's money,
Right.
you know?
Right.
So
Yep.
those gatekeepers have to make decisions based on that. And what it unfortunately does for us who are creators is it pits us against each other in a way that is not mentally healthy.
Yep.
So we sit back going, well, why that person and why not me? Why their project and not my project?
Right.
And the reality is a lot of the projects that get picked are for reasons that aren't really necessarily about creative.
Right.
And it's whether or not it's because they're ticking off boxes politically, or it's just because they're playing it safe, which is, in both cases are true. But the people that are making these decisions, these gatekeepers, are doing it by proxy of the audience they think they have,
Right.
right?
Yep.
But we put all of this onus into these gatekeepers, and it's like, well, if you get that telefilm money, and if you get that Netflix sign off, it's like, well, then your show's a real thing, your movie's a real movie because someone else decided that that was the case. But they're deciding on behalf of a potential audience.
Right.
And that's the irony of people like dumping on YouTube, because there is no gatekeeper on YouTube
Right.
other than the fact that you have to self-finance your stuff to put it up initially.
Right.
But you are going directly to the audience, and the
Correct.
audience tells you directly if they want to see it or not.
Yeah.
You don't have some person in an office somewhere deciding that for you.
Yeah.
And the audience will decide whether or not your channel succeeds, your videos continue to move on.
Well, and considering, I mean, and you know how I feel about all of this. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been doing this 30 years and probably the most produced producer in Canada, and I can't raise a nickel of funding anymore because of the system. And the system is run by people that may have never made a movie in their life. Or they don't necessarily read scripts to determine whether or not it's the project that they should go with, who the audience is the audience actually going to see these movies? Most of the films that are getting made in this country do not find an audience. And I've always said, and I've said this to the funders numerous times in person, best project wins, best script wins, best commercial film wins, and all of that just goes right over their heads. Their eyeballs roll into the back of their skulls, and they just don't get it. And it's I've seen numerous of these first features get made that go absolutely nowhere because they're not meant for any audience that actually goes and watches films.
Yeah,
that's the fact.
Yeah, and I always say that it's like we don't have a talent problem in Canada either. We've got like so many talented. What we have is a distribution problem.
Right.
And I've worked with, and I like all the distributors I've worked with, just to throw that out there.
Yeah.
But the problem is they're all inefficient. They don't, because the problem with the distribution system in Canada is it's a volume game. They have to have volume to survive as a distributor, but that also means they don't have the resources or the time to actually put into any one specific project, because they're just treating it more like a shotgun method, where it's like, well, the more we put out, and they're not really banking on any one of them doing super well. They just all want all of them to do okay. And that's enough for them to keep going.
Well, there's a two-factor process here. One is that most of the significant distributors in this country focus primarily on non-Canadian films to distribute in Canada. Whether they have a Sony Picture Classics deal or whether they have a, whoever deal, that they focus all of their money, and that's where their money is made. And most of them don't take very many CanCon films anymore because none of them make them any money, nor are they prepared to do the work to really try to get it make money. The other thing is most Canadian broadcasters aren't buying CanCon like they used to. And they're buying the studio films because it's easy and because they know that the audience is there, but they're not there to support the local filmmakers at all. And theaters after COVID lost a ton of money. So they're interested in putting bums in seats, and they don't believe in supporting Canadian films because they don't believe Canadians are going to go see their own films. It's a race to the bottom. And as a distributor, I can tell you, I've tried numerous times to get a really great Canadian film in a Canadian theater, and I can tell you honestly, it's a flat either they don't respond to my emails or my phone calls, or it's a flat no without even looking or investigating any information about the film.
Well, the problem has always been that CanCon has served television, it served radio, but it never served film. Because for whoever is in charge of that never had the onus to force the studios or the theater chains and whoever owns them to give the same CanCon rules to theaters as they did for radio play and for television. And for those that don't know what I'm talking about, there are rules for a certain percentage, 35%, I believe, in radio in particular. I think television's the same. 35% of their content during main hours. So we're talking about like the hours that people are actually awake, not like from, midnight on, has to be original Canadian content. And that's how we have all these musicians that we know, and we have, TV series that air at prime time. Because of government mandates, which have allowed those to happen. But nobody ever forced the theater chains like, well, you have 10 screens in your multiplex. Well, 3 of those have to be Canadian films at all times. They never did that because the argument that I always heard was that the chains will fight back and the studios will say, well, then you don't get any of our movies. And that's bullshit.
Yeah, I agree.
because they need to make the Canada is a huge market for them,
Yeah,
and they want to make money as well from them. So it's like that's bullshit that would have gone that way,
right.
but because of that, we don't have, so we're lucky if maybe there's one Canadian film in the theater at any point in time, and usually there's not even that.
No, no. There are months where we don't see a Canadian film. I mean, and that we're talking just to be specific, English speaking Canada, because in Quebec, their government supports their
Yeah.
content and so on and so forth. But in English speaking Canada, you could go weeks and months without seeing a Canadian English speaking Canadian film in a theater.
No, the system was set up to fail. And the
Yeah,
other problem is we've got, and I don't begrudge telefilm. I love the fact that they exist because
yeah,
there's so many countries that they don't have something like
correct.
telefilm.
Yeah, yeah,
But the problem also is that whether or not they want to admit it, they are kind of a studio. Um, just in because they finance stuff, that's what
right,
studios are.
right,
But they don't have any incentive to make a profit.
right.
It doesn't matter if you don't pay them back.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so many most producers bank on the fact that they don't have to pay them back. Otherwise, most producers wouldn't be able to exist because they'd all be in debt.
right, right. But I also think, that, and you are doing this now, and I've been thinking about this for a long time. Like part of the certification in Canada requires that either you release your movie in a theater to access your tax credits, or you have to sell it to the broadcaster. The problem is that if neither happens, you aren't able to get your tax credits. So, and Apple platform and Amazon platform and all these other platforms are not recognized, right, as part of releasing your film, just as much as YouTube's not recognized either. And I feel like the way things are now, that we need to change things up and acknowledge that these platforms are the future of distribution, not broadcast per se, not theatrical per se, but VOD, right? Or, alternatives like YouTube, which gets a much grander audience than probably Apple, Amazon, and all these other platforms put together.
Oh, they 100% do.
Yeah. So, but it's not recognized as a approved platform to put your films up, which
What's not?
YouTube, for example, or Apple TV or Amazon Prime. None of these are recognized by Ontario Tax Credit Office or CAVCO.
And yet those companies are all shooting stuff here and taking advantage of our tax
Correct.
credits.
Correct.
But when we put them, anyway, the whole thing seems a little crooked.
Yeah, it's very broken. And
Well, it's just out of date. It's designed
yeah,
for it isn't designed for the world we currently live in or
no,
the way people are actually watching movies. I mean, I remember like a decade ago, Telefilm put a lot of money into this survey about what do Canadians actually watch,
right.
right? And the two top things
Hmm.
were genre
Yep.
and comedy.
Yep.
Which I was like, that's amazing. So now Telefilm's going to take this information back and
Yep.
use that towards what they fund.
Yeah. No.
Nope.
No.
They just kept on making the same shit they always make.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, well, wait a minute, but now you have definitive proof. You put like millions of dollars into this research and you're just going to do nothing with it. You're
Yeah.
not going to change the way you work.
Yeah.
What the fuck was the point of this?
Yes. Yes. I mean, listen, we export more comedians than any other country in the world. Okay, but Telefilm, the last comedy that I think Telefilm supported was Sarah Pauli's movie a bunch of years ago with Seth.
Oh, there's been more since
But not
then.
many. Not many. Like you can
but
count them
nothing
on a
that-
hand. You can count them on
but
a hand.
it's just none that have broken through in the way that the fact that we can't name them
Right.
says a lot. But there
Yeah.
have been comedies since then,
But I mean, and genre is not something that they care to support either.
which is insane because that's what if you look at most distributors,
Yeah.
they rely on genre because they're audience driven.
Yes. Yes.
People wouldn't, there's entire broadcasters out there that only do genre pictures, right?
Yeah.
One of the biggest, probably the biggest studio that emerged in the last couple of years in the States.
A24.
I wasn't gonna even say A20. I mean,
Okay.
A24 is great, but
Yeah.
I was gonna say a horror guy. Why is it, Get Out? Why am I
Oh,
blanking
yeah,
on his
Jordan
name?
Peele and Ari Aster,
No, no,
probably.
I'm talking about the producer though.
Oh,
Oh my God, why is my brain? You gotta edit this together so I sound more smarter. Uh, I just listened to a great podcast. He was just on Smartless. Blumhouse.
Bloomhouse, right.
You know,
Yeah,
and they only do genre.
right.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, I mean, A24. Here's the thing: A24 is great, but it only exists because it's a person with that's very rich wanted to make a bunch of art films, and
Right.
that's great because if that didn't exist,
Right.
uh, we wouldn't have a lot of really really amazing films. But
Right.
that came out of someone going, "I don't care if I lose money,"
Right. Right.
you know, which is what you have to do if you want it. You have
Yeah.
to risk, and the problem is that with the exception of them.
Yeah.
There's very few risk-averse producers and distributors in our world anymore.
Well,
You know,
and I would say risk adverse investors because there's no incentive for people to invest in Canadian content or cinema because there's no tax incentive for them to do so.
but I'd argue that there's very little original content in America as well.
No, I would agree with
Most of the
that.
films that are hitting
Yeah.
theaters
Yeah.
are sequels, requels,
Yeah.
recreates,
Yeah.
prequels. Like when the Oscar nominations came out this year, and I'm a
Mhm.
person who tries to keep up, I didn't recognize half of those movies
Yeah. Yeah.
yet
I
because
agree.
I hadn't been to the festivals this year.
Right.
And I was just like, I don't know what any of these movies are, which was such a foreign feeling for me as
Yeah.
someone who has spent a lot of their life obsessed with like knowing the films that are coming out and what's
Right.
coming down the pike.
I mean, there's so many things that, I think are wrong. I mean, you mentioned the festival thing. I mean, TIFF, which is the largest Canadian film festival in the country, programs less Canadian films than many of the other Canadian film festivals in our country. Why is that? Yet, even though they wouldn't take my film for this last year's incarnation of the festival, they were sure quick to send me an email asking me to donate money to their organization.
Yeah. Yeah, that email is blocked on my
Right.
my inbox
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've made 7 features. They
Yeah.
haven't invited any of them,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know? So
Yeah.
I have a weird relationship with TIFF too.
But I mean,
Uh,
the same thing goes for like my film Home Free, which I'm super proud of. Has played more festivals in the United States than it has in Canada. I've had more love out of the U.S. than I have in Canada. And I'm getting a complex about it, but I feel like part of it is that I'm a man, I'm a white man, and that I'm Jewish. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't honor and push forward diversity because I'm a big supporter of that. I really do. But I mean, we're stopping putting certain films in because of checking boxes, as you said earlier. And the same thing goes with funding. Like now, when you submit an application for funding, you get a questionnaire that asks you, what's your sexual orientation? What's your nationality? What's your color of your skin?
it used
All
to be
these.
illegal to ask that kind of stuff
Well,
on
I
job
still feel
applications.
that it is. Like, I mean, according to the Canadian privacy laws, I feel like it is illegal for them to ask. But what's happening is when you fill out that questionnaire, you go into a pile. There's a pile for white males, pile for white females, pile for LGBTQ, pile for BIPOC, and they're picking X number of projects out of each pile, which goes against what should be really happening, which is let's make the best films possible.
Which again, like I just go back to that's why for me right now, just from both it's an audience point of view and
Yeah,
also just a mental health point of view, that's
yeah,
why because I've been fortunate that I've been able to grow an audience on YouTube,
right,
I just go, well, why would I go back to stand in line for
right,
like my bowl of gruel
right,
when
yeah,
I've got the path of least resistance here.
yeah,
I have zero gatekeepers.
yeah,
It advertises itself because
yeah,
YouTube has its own algorithm that does that.
yeah,
I don't need anyone's permission because I know exactly what you're talking about and I felt that too. And
right,
so but for me it's like as I mentioned earlier, I'm like I just can't I just know me, and I
Mhm.
can't sit back and let my brain go, well, why this person and not me, and why this and that not me? Because I don't want to feel like I'm pitted against other filmmakers.
No,
That's not what
no,
the whole point of it is,
no, you're right.
and that's why I like YouTube so much as well, because I have this network of other people that are in the same niche as me on
Right,
YouTube.
right,
And I don't feel like I'm competing against them because our audiences can watch all of our content
right,
because we're not competing for like slots on YouTube. There is no slots. It doesn't exist. People can watch as much or as little content as they want of everyone's, right?
right.
So
Yep,
everyone can succeed there because there is no threshold.
right,
My new analogy, I've got two that I like to use for the Canadian film industry in comparison to YouTube, right? Well, the first one is just in terms of like how I feel about the Canadian industry and my place in it right now, is it feels a bit like an elevator, you
right,
know, where I feel like, and depending on where you're at in your career, you get on at a different floor.
right,
And right now in the film and television industry, it feels like an elevator that's just going down,
right,
right? Where I feel what I'm doing on YouTube is an elevator that just keeps on going up.
right,
Every month we have more subscribers, we're getting more views, we're
right,
making more money from various ways of doing it. It just I
right,
don't know where that ends.
right,
Where I just look at the future of my future in the Canadian film and television industry. And as I say this, I'm by no means like retiring myself.
right,
I definitely think I've got other content in me I want to create in those spaces.
right,
But I also just look at it and go, I don't know if I like what's the plan there to support my family. I don't
right,
know what that looks like because so many of those decisions, I mean, not so many, all those decisions are out of my control.
right,
And I don't do well when I don't have control. So,
right.
um, and you just look at for those that have like a playback subscription,
Right.
um, which for
Maybe,
those who
maybe
don't
you
know,
should. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
playback is our high school yearbook rag. It's the place we go to self-congratulate ourselves and to
Right.
put up press releases that only we read ourselves.
It's true.
It's no offense to playback, but
Yeah.
it's just like
It's the
when
Canadian version of Hollywood Reporter, except lots of people read Hollywood Reporter and nobody reads playback.
no, and if you want to see yourself in playback, all you have to do is submit a press release
Yeah.
because they need to have content
I
every
know
day as
because I'm
well.
probably hold the Guinness Book of World Records for most press releases
Yeah.
launched on playback.
But you can't. It's not like you can't. You also have to have a subscription to read the article, so it's not like they get circulated widely anyway. So
Right.
it's
Right.
what it is. But
But so sorry for
anyway,
interrupting, but
but
go
let me
ahead.
just finish. So
Yeah.
so what I was going to say is, so if you do read playback, though, the one thing you'll notice is probably every single week there's like a new article about, well, this broadcaster is laying off 500 people, and
Yeah.
this company just dissolved into that company. And I
Right.
look at it, and from the outside, it looks like an industry that's on fire. It's as if you were like walking by a street,
Right.
and the entire street was on fire, and all the houses were on fire. But then you still have people walking by and going, "Is there any houses there? I want to live on that street. I want to work in a film." I'm like, "Don't you see what is happening? Like,
Yeah.
what are
Yeah.
you walking into?" It looks like I don't know what the future looks like for our industry
Right.
right now, and it terrifies me. And instead of being terrified, I decided to pivot.
So that being the case, so you obviously you're on YouTube, which is probably the most watched platform in the world. Do you see uh, um people like you and me working together to make films on this platform, and that is where our main release strategy is? Like, do you see other filmmakers gravitating towards that as well as being the way to monetize their content now?
Yeah, I just want to look up someone as a good example of that because it's actually the thing uh, that I'm like if I'm gonna make a return into traditional media,
Yeah.
um, I just don't foresee a path where I want to like spend 2 years trying to get money from telefilm
Yes.
or to submit for this and submit for that. I just like I don't have it in me.
Sign me up.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
totally.
so for me, I'm like, I think there's a way to do it on YouTube, and I'm slowly trying to figure out what that is.
Right.
Because I spent the last 2 years not mastering YouTube, but
Right.
studying it.
Yeah.
and really understanding how it works,
Right.
you know? And there are people, there's this woman named Kanigra Dion
Hmm.
who is called like the Tyler Perry of YouTube.
Okay.
Um, and I don't mean to speak ill of her,
Hmm.
but she's got millions of followers. Her videos get millions of views. She's built like literally a studio system where they bought houses to shoot in, and they own a
Right.
restaurant that caters all of their stuff, and they shoot in
Wow.
that as well.
Right.
Her content is not amazing.
Right.
She's using non-union actors. It's all local people,
Right.
and it just started off doing like her putting up sketches with like
Right.
herself and her friends, but it's grown into now on that channel they have like ongoing like what we would consider TV series where there's like just new episodes of like an ongoing story. But then also she'll throw up a feature
Right.
about something, right? And
Right.
like I said, they're not like if you watch them, you'd be like, "Oh my God, like how is she so successful?" Because they seem like they're done by high school students. They seem very unprofessional
Right.
and just unpolished,
Right.
but people don't care about that. There is an audience for that, you know.
Right.
And she's part of a more of a marginalized group. Like she's a black filmmaker in the States, and so I think there's also part of that is just people seeing, you know, that are unrepresented, seeing something they don't normally get to see.
Right.
But I look what she's done,
Right.
and her business model, you know. And if you want to learn more about her, she did a great interview on a channel called Colin and Samir, and they're great. If you want to learn a lot about YouTube, follow Colin and Samir because they really follow the content creators and interview all the top ones, and you can learn a ton of information from watching them. Um, but she's built this kind of studio system within it where she's able to produce whatever content she wants.
Right.
And you know, the trick to YouTube though, and the biggest challenge is it's a volume game, right?
Yeah.
You've got to build a library as quickly as possible. And so for filmmakers, you know, I brought this project to you years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
I put together this pitch proposal to take to all these other filmmakers to go, hey, why don't we take all of our films
Yep.
that don't have distribution right now
Right.
and put them together? Because really, for YouTube to work, you have to show up on a regular basis,
Right.
you know, and for it to be monetized, you have to have 1,000 subscribers.
Right.
That's a hard thing for one person to do at the gate. But my mentality was that, well, if you have a whole bunch of filmmakers
Right.
contributing to this thing,
Yep.
then it is possible, right? I
Yep.
couldn't get enough people interested,
Yeah.
you know, because they wanted to hold out for that, you know,
Yeah.
$400 they get from Tubi
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whatever else it is for their
Yeah.
film that's 20 years old, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do want to, like, I am in the early stages of, you know, trying to put together something that could work in the scripted realm
Right.
for YouTube.
Yeah.
But I also like I don't want to say too much about it
Yeah.
because I've done the work and I
Right.
don't want to just give it away for free to people.
No.
But
No.
also it's, you know, I just did my own research and it's out there for anyone to do themselves. But I don't understand why more people aren't doing that
Right.
and just taking control of their own future because I don't know. I don't mean to be a naysayer about the film and television industry the way it is. I
Right.
just don't under it just doesn't make sense from a business point of view to me right
No.
now.
I mean, I think that, everybody's still, like you said, holding out to hope that a funder is going to give them money or a private investor is going to give them money or whatever. And, I talk to emerging filmmakers pretty much every day. They want to talk to me. They want to get advice and things like that. Or they're pitching me a project that they want me to consider to take on for distribution so that I would give them a letter that they can then go to the funders and try. And I mean, they're holding on to whatever that they can when the reality is there's nothing really to hold on to anymore. We're coming close to the end, but I wanted to say thank you. But I also want you to tell people where they can find your PB with J content and quickly talk about this awesome book for which I'm grateful enough to have a hard copy of and how people can get that and change their life.
Thanks, buddy. So if you asked me 5 years ago if I would write a cookbook, I'd probably laugh at you. But I just recently wrote a cookbook that you can order through. What's the best way to order? I mean, do you do show notes and stuff like that for the
Yes.
channel?
Yes.
We'll put it. I'll give you the link. We'll put it in the show notes.
Okay.
So you can order the ebook version of that. We do have a limited number of print copies that people can order. So I'll
I
give you all
smell
that
a second
information.
press. I smell
We're
a
doing a second
press.
printing. Yeah, we had enough.
Nice.
So yeah, so on YouTube, it's just if you type in PB with J, there's also the website is pbwithj.ca, and that'll take you to everything. You can order the book off there as well.
Right.
But yeah, we're there now. We put up well, we do three. We do 2 new videos a week, and then I do a weekly live stream where I make dinner and I put up the recipes a couple days in advance, and people cook along with us.
Nice.
So we're there, and that's kind of the main thing that I'm focusing on right now. Because, like I said, it grows every single day, but also I just get like the most wonderful emails and messages from people every single day, letting me know that you know we've helped inspire them to get off their diabetes medication or to lose 20 pounds, 50 pounds, 60 pounds. And it just makes me feel connected to people and to humanity in a way that the film and television industry hasn't in a long time.
Well, you're doing God's work, right? I mean, essentially.
Trying to.
Yeah. Listen, dude, you're my friend, your family. I appreciate you coming on to this first episode of hopefully something that will continue on many years to come. So thank you very much for doing this and for speaking truth, my friend, because that's the purpose of this podcast is to speak truth.
Well, I hope that this podcast solves all of our problems with all the guests you're going to have on. You're going to figure it out.
I'm going to figure it out. And listen, thank you all out there for joining us for Unleashed, a producer's guide to indie film. Please share this with your friends and family, and we'll see you next time. Thanks very much.
Every time they look at us, we'll blow